I'm going to begin and go through some tricky situations. These are things that we see frequently across the state, some things that you probably will have encountered. We tried, when we give a tricky situation presentation, we try really hard to think about the most common issues that we see. Some of these are related to COVID in this past year, like you'll see one regarding income, and some are not. They're really kind of pertain to any year. And then when I finish my portion, I'm gonna pass it over to Juana, and she is gonna provide you with tricky situations related to DACA and undocumented students. And then as you guys go through, feel free to shoot questions over in the chat box. I'm sure Juana will, we'll kind of take turns, watching the chat box and try to address questions for each other. So yeah, just let us know if there's anything that we don't touch on that you still have questions about. All right, so we have different scenarios. So we're going to go through a scenario and then we're going to give you an answer. Sometimes when we have a smaller group that we're doing this for, we'll say throw an answer over in the chat box. But we have so many great folks on here this morning, I think we'll just move into the answer. So scenario and then answer. All right. So scenario one, we have a student named Reggie, and he grew up in Georgia with his biological mom, Barbara. Well, in late 2018, his mom married his stepmother, Gwen. So Barbara, Gwen, and Reggie have all since relocated to North Carolina. Okay. So they're all living in North Carolina. They're all living in the same house, and Reggie's parents are married, the two mothers. Okay. When Reggie completes the FAFSA in North Carolina, what parent information is he required to put on the FAFSA form? Okay. And I think that word required is an important piece of this because usually with parent information, it's not a choice. Like we just can, pick who we want to list. Okay. It's requirements. So Reggie's going to be required to include both parents' information since they're legally married. So it doesn't matter if they're same sex or not, because in 2015, the Supreme Court ruled that same-sex couples have the same, fundamental rights to marriage in all states. That includes North Carolina. And so it's just the same rule as you think about a step-parent. So when we're working with students, sometimes we'll have a student who says, my parents are divorced, I live with my mom and my stepdad, or in this situation, my stepmom. And the FAFSA form is really concerned with who is in your household. And so that's going to include the step-parent, same sex or not. Okay. So there's one tricky situation. That's kind of how we're going to go through this. This will give you a good idea of the flow of our presentation. Okay, so we have another scenario. We have Jaden. Jaden is a senior, and he's been living with his grandmother since he started high school. Okay, his parents never married. His father, who he's never had a relationship with, is incarcerated. And he sees his mother, but she doesn't work. She's got a drug issue. Maybe, the relationship we're not sure of, but he lives with his grandmother and has basically since he was 14, since he started high school. But his grandmother never went through the court system to get legal guardianship of him. And this is a really, really common thing that we see. So how does he proceed with filling out the FAFSA form? If, he lives with grandmother, he talks to his mom, his father's incarcerated, doesn't have a relationship with him. The FAFSA form member is going to ask for parent one and parent two income information and asset information. So how do we navigate that? So we have two different options, and this happens sometimes, and it's not necessarily always a choice for the student. Sometimes it involves communicating with the financial aid office. That's a thing that we tell students to do a lot, is they reach out to your financial aid office. So here's option one. He does not put his grandmother's information on. His grandmother did not get legal guardianship of him. I didn't say the word custody. We say legal guardianship. That's the federal regulations. So he doesn't put his grandmother's information on since technically she's not his legal guardian and he has contact with his mother. Okay. So you don't have to put a second parent down if it doesn't, apply to you. So in this situation, the student could decide to just reach out to his mom and say, I need your tax information. Let's just do this. We'll leave, parent two blank and let's just move on. She doesn't work. So there's probably not going to be a whole lot of income. So, he may be eligible for some aid and he may get some follow-up questions from the financial aid office. He could also try to be independent for financial aid purposes, okay? So he'll get a question on the FAFSA about if he wants to provide parent information, and he can say no to that initially. But then he will have to reach out to the college's financial aid office and explain his situation and see what their process is to essentially appeal to be independent. Okay. So it does say that if the option is given, option one would be easier for the student if that's the way they want to go. But he may decide, I just am not interested in trying to reach out to my mother. It's not healthy. It's not what I want to do. Communicate with that financial aid office, because there are steps to try to become independent so that he doesn't have to provide, his mother's information or father's information on the FAFSA form. At no point would he provide grandmother's information. So that would not happen at any point, because she is not the legal guardian, even if he'd lived with her since he was 2. Okay, we do see that sometimes too. So they're tricky. We call them tricky situations. All right, so scenario 3. Yolanda is preparing to attend UNCW, and she's in the middle of doing her FAFSA, and she's got a question she's not sure how to answer, and that's the number in college. Another common question we get. So Yolanda is the youngest of 3 siblings, and she already has one sister who's graduated. Okay, so she's done with college, all finished. The other one's at Meredith. Okay, and then on top of that, Yolanda's mom is taking full-time online course load at ECU. So how many numbers in their family are attending college? So keep in mind, the question on the FAFSA is how many family members, how many people in your household under the age of 24 are attending college. Okay, so that's the question. So Yolanda's going to include herself. So a student always includes themselves. Okay, so include yourself. But Yolanda has that older sister who's at Meredith, so she's going to include her. Her mom is probably over 24. Okay, so her mom is not going to count. But the nice thing about this is her mom is probably doing her FAFSA form also, since she's going online to ECU. Her mom is going to get the same question. And I talk to parents about this too. We do. So the mom may say, well, what do I do with that question? Do I just list my 2 kids? Well, Yolanda's going to include herself also. So when Yolanda's mom does the FAFSA form, she's going to include herself and her 2 children. So she's going to have 3 in college. That's Yolanda's mom. When Yolanda does the FAFSA form, she can't include her mom because she's over 24. So it's just Yolanda and her sister. Okay, so hopefully that helps with that one. All right, so scenario 4. Craig's mom and dad live together in the same house in Raleigh. They've never been legally married. They just live in the same house, never decided to get married. Okay. Craig's mom provides over 50% of the support for him and claims him as an exemption on her tax return. Okay. So Craig is about to do his FAFSA. He's going to go to NC State, and he includes both parents' financial information on the FAFSA form. Okay. Well, NC State and North Carolina and the feds accept both parents' information. Okay, so let's look at that one. Yes. So Craig's parents live under the same roof. It doesn't matter if they're married or not. Okay. So again, the FAFSA form is concerned with who is in your household. Okay. So the first thing we need to do is think about who lives in the house. So Craig's biological mother and father live in the same house. Doesn't matter if they're married or not. That's automatic. Parent 1, parent 2 on the FAFSA form. Okay. So that's kind of how that one would go. Right. So let's talk about Marissa. Okay. Marissa has been unaccompanied by a parent or guardian for the past 3 months. And she's been residing at her friends' houses. She's essentially kind of couch surfing. Her teachers and classmates at her local high school have no idea that she hasn't had a home to stay in because she just hasn't felt comfortable sharing the information with anyone. She also may not identify as unaccompanied or homeless. You know, she's got a roof over her head. And now she's sitting in your office and she's saying, I need help with the FAFSA form, okay? And then she shares with you that she really hasn't talked to her mom for 3 months and she's just staying at her friends' houses, okay? And you need to decide how she kind of proceeds with that dependency status portion of the FAFSA form. And so, you know, it's going to involve a bit of a conversation. So it's hard because the students really do have to self-identify. They've got to tell you what's going on. But Marissa is going to be classified as an independent student because as you go through those dependency questions, you know, she's based on this situation, based on, you know, we're assuming that this example, I would also say, provides some assumptions. And this is what happens when we talk to students. So I'm going to go back up for a second, okay? Because one thing that this situation does not get into is why Marissa is unaccompanied and she has been staying at friends' houses for 3 months. And the why for this is the tricky part. And this is where the student has got to have an honest conversation with you or with the financial aid office. So did Marissa get into a fight with her mom because maybe Marissa's mom doesn't like her boyfriend? And she was like, whatever, I'm still dating him. I'm leaving and I'll just go stay at my friend's house. That doesn't qualify for her to be independent. That's not an automatic there. Most financial aid offices, if not all, are going to say, nope, you got to talk to mom, get over the boyfriend thing, and we need her financial aid information on the FAFSA form. Okay, so the background here is important. If Marissa is not staying at her parents' house because maybe one of her parents has been abusive for years and she finally got out, if the situation is dangerous, if parents have drug issues, there's different scenarios there that may allow for her to go through and be classified as an independent. And this is where her talking to you is important, because that financial aid office is probably, and you may have, we have a lot of folks on, there's a good chance that you guys have been asked for something like this before. The financial aid office may ask you or someone else for a letter or some type of proof about the situation. Perhaps it's going on. Because remember that the financial aid office at the college is giving out state and federal money. So if they're going to kind of bend rules, sort of, they've got to be able to have proof in their files. They get audited. So they've just got to have proof to say, yes, we made Marissa independent. I talked to their school counselor or their college bar, whoever it is, and it's a bad situation at home, and they don't need to be reaching out to them for financial aid information. So in that situation, they're going to answer yes to being unaccompanied or homeless, and then you'll just move through if there's anything that needs to be verified or if you get any requests from that. So sometimes it's kind of tricky because you've got to, you've really got to kind of give some background information. All right, so let's talk about Michael. Michael is a senior in high school, and he plans to graduate early in December 2020. So it's January. So this is Michael, and he graduated last month and start college at Central Piedmont in spring 2021. Okay, so he's come to you, and he's done, and he wants to do his FAFSA form to get going at Central Piedmont. Which FAFSA form is he going to complete, and which tax year is he going to kind of handle? So this happens a lot, and it doesn't really matter the year. Fill in the year for whatever year you have this happen. Students do graduate early, and they want to start college kind of in the spring. So for this student who wants to start college like right now, so they're coming into your office and they're like, I'm ready, I'm going to take some classes at our community college, okay? They're actually going to need to get busy with 2 different FAFSA forms, okay? So they're going to have to complete the FAFSA form with tax information from a couple of years ago, okay? So they're going to need to do their FAFSA form as if they were a senior last year, okay? So they're graduating early and they want to start college in that same school year that your seniors did last year that they were graduating. So they need to knock out that FAFSA form that you had your seniors do last year, which is the 2021 FAFSA form. And they also need to pretty much right after that go ahead and get busy with the next FAFSA form. And go ahead and do the 2021, 2022 FAFSA form for the next school year. Okay. And fill in the blank for next year too. I mean, so if you have a student come to you next year in December, December of 21, which is actually this year, it's 2021. So if you have students come to you in December and they say, I think I'm just going to graduate and I'm done, I have all my courses, I'm ready to start community college, you're going to have them do the 2021-22 FAFSA form and the 22-23 one. So they're going to need to kind of get busy with 2 of them. Okay, so not the end of the world, but just be ready that they need to knock out 2. Okay. Elsa, let's talk about Elsa. She is a 17-year-old mother of baby to be Dora, and she's applying for college for fall 2021. Okay. Elsa will still be living at home because her parents are going to pay for childcare for Dora, and they're providing the food and the roof over the head, and they're being really, really supportive so that Elsa can get her education and Dora can be well taken care of. Okay. So Elsa's going to do her FAFSA form, and she is going to have a question on there about a parent, okay? And it's going to kind of relate to whether she's dependent or independent on the FAFSA form. So is she dependent or independent? She's a mom, right? So we might think she's independent, but not in this situation, okay? In this situation, Elsa's parents are providing more than 50% of her financial support and Dora's financial support. And so she's still dependent on the FAFSA form. So Elsa is going to have to provide her parents' financial information as parent 1 and parent 2 on the FAFSA. If Elsa, decided, okay, well, I'm gonna head out. I'm gonna move out. We're gonna get our own place, and I've got a good job, and I'm gonna support us and take some classes. Then Elsa would be independent because she'll be supporting her and Dora's financial situation. Okay. All right, I've just got a couple more, and then I'm gonna be passing it over to Juana. Right. So Maya submits her FAFSA in October. Okay, so Maya does her FAFSA form in October. Her mother's a hairdresser, and she's been out of work most of 2020. Okay, so you have a student, maybe they went ahead and we're doing this in January, so it's kind of an interesting time. A lot of your students may have already done their FAFSA form back in October, November, December, but maybe not. Okay, so you have a student who went ahead and did her FAFSA in October, and her mother was out of work pretty much all of last year. But in 2019, she had really steady income as a hairdresser. Okay, but unfortunately, because of COVID, she lost her income for 2020. It's not the same. It's much less. It's non-existent, somewhere in that area. And now Maya is worried that she won't be able to afford Elon or whatever institution that she's looking at. Okay. And this is really common for students. We've heard this, for years before. I did my FAFSA. It looks like we had good income, but the reality is, we didn't, right? Because now we use 2 years old income information. So back in 2019, you might have had good income, but in 2020, something changed. Okay, and so here's how you're going to advise the student. So when the student does their FAFSA, whether they did it in October already or whether they haven't done it yet, okay, they need to provide accurate information. Doesn't matter when they do it. So if the student came to you and said, I did my FAFSA back in October and I listed, what we made in 2019, but it's changed, they did everything right. They put the correct information for 2019. And at this point, they're going to have to reach out to the financial aid office. And I'm sure every financial aid office at this point has a very smooth process for these situations, for the special circumstances, hardships, whatever it might be. Or you may have a student that says, I did my FAFSA back in October, and it asked me what we made in 2019, but it wasn't right. So I just put what we made in 2020. Well, the student made an error there, so they're definitely going to have to reach out to the financial aid office. And this is where financial aid offices may vary with instruction. They may say, go back into the FAFSA, update it with correct income information, resend it. Or the financial aid office may say, just give us your tax information and we'll fix it for you. Okay, so it just kind of depends there on that situation. But institutions are able to do something called professional judgment, and it depends on each institution, how they handle things and what paperwork they want and all that. So it's really, really helpful by the time the student gets into having to provide documents and ask questions. It's really helpful if they have an institution in mind, or if they're at least narrowed it down, because it's hard to be at this point in calling 5 or 6 institutions. And then if they give you different instructions, for the financial aid office, that's hard too. So it's really helpful if they've started to narrow down the school they're interested in attending. Okay. All right, so let's talk about Lynn. She was part of the North Carolina foster care system since she was 5, and now she's 18 and she's aged out of the foster care system. And she plans to attend college for the first time in Elizabeth City. Okay, and she's doing her FAFSA. And what will her dependency status be and why? Okay, so when Lynn does her FAFSA form, as you guys know, there's a list of dependency questions. And one of the questions is, at any time since you turned 13, were both of your parents deceased? Were you in foster care? Were you a ward of the court or dependent of the court? And so the student is going to say yes, and that is going to make them independent because of the foster care piece. And then keep in mind that there is some money, there's some assistance out there for those students. As I'm sure you've probably seen, there's NC Reach. There's a program called Link that's usually through the Social Security or DSS office, DSS office. And so those programs provide things like driving them to class and back. I mean, there's different support out there for students that are labeled as independent for foster care purposes after the age of 13. So there's different assistance out there to kind of help them through it. So that is it for my portion. I'm going to go back in. I saw that some of our fabulous team members have been working in the chat room. Thank you. I'm going to go back in too and see if there's anything else that needs to be addressed. And Juana, do you want me to stop sharing or do you want me to just click for you?
You can just click for me just so that we don't have to disrupt the PowerPoint. Thank you for that. Yeah, so next we'll go into talking about tricky situations that we typically see when it comes to working with DACA, undocumented, and students from mixed status families. So we'll look at this first one. Mariana is currently in the process of applying to adjust her status in the United States. Is she eligible to complete FAFSA? So when we look at this scenario, it's really going to depend on what her status is going to be. And so in order to qualify or to be eligible for FAFSA and to receive federal funding, students must have one of these eligibility criteria, whether it's being a U.S. citizen or an eligible non-citizen. Which an eligible non-citizen would include anyone who is a U.S. permanent resident, someone who has an I-94 from USCIS, and where it indicates that they are a refugee, where asylum has been granted. We do see a lot of situations where asylum is in process and it hasn't been granted yet, and so if it's not granted, they're not eligible. So it must be granted. Also, they're Cuban, Haitian entrant, conditional entrant, or parolee. So if they have an I-94 indicating one of these, they would be eligible. In addition, if they have a T visa, or the parent or the student has a T visa, if the parent or the student is a battered immigrant and are under the Violence Against Women Act, they could also be eligible. And any citizens of the Federated States of Micronesia, the Republic of Marshall Islands, or the Republic of Palau. So it's just important to keep in mind and understand the different eligibility criteria requirements, because if a student isn't a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, there are definitely other eligibility criteria that they could fall under. And we look at the next scenario. And this is one that we see a lot, and a lot of you probably see this as well. Camila is in the she's a U.S. citizen. She was born in the United States, but her parents do not have a Social Security number. However, they do have a tax identification number, or ITIN. What steps should she consider when applying for FAFSA? So some of the things to keep in mind is that Camila, being a U.S. citizen, she would be eligible to receive financial aid. She would be eligible to create an FSA ID. However, the parents will not be able to create it. So when completing the FAFSA, the parents will have to, or the student will have to enter zeros for the Social Security number. It's very important that students and parents never enter the ITIN number. And this is a very common mistake that we see with parents and students mistaking the ITIN number with the Social Security number. And so let's make sure that that they're not doing that. So enter zeros. They're not going to be able to use the data retrieval tool. And so one thing that will pop up whenever they are completing FAFSA and when they're close to being done, students are going to receive an error message. FAFSA is basically going to say, hey, you entered zeros for your parents. Are you sure this is what you meant to enter? So a lot of students get stuck here. My colleague and I, we get a lot of calls about this part here. So the only thing students need to do here, if they do get an error message, they just need to click on check for errors. If they entered zeros for both of their parents, the error message is going to come up again. So when it comes up again, they just have to click on check for errors again, and they will be able to proceed with the application. And lastly, there will have to, since the parents don't have an FSA ID, they will need to sign and print and sign the signature page, mail it to the federal student aid programs, and students just have to make sure that they do submit the FAFSA. Another common mistake that we see with students is once they print that signature page, they forget to go back and submit. So they will have to submit the FAFSA without that parent's signature because you're going to mail it to the federal programs. So, and also, we do have a one-pager on CFNC, and I can send it to Chris to see if they can send it along with the PowerPoint. But we do have a really great one-pager that outlines and explains the steps for students and parents and also educators. All right, next scenario. Mario is in the process of preparing to complete the FAFSA, but realizes that his parents have not filed taxes in previous years. What can Mario do? So this is another scenario that we see, not as often as the other one that we just reviewed, but we do see this. So Mario can go ahead and complete the FAFSA without having the actual income tax information or the tax information. So he can enter that information manually. And just, if he has a W-2s for his parents, they can use that, but they can answer the questions manually. If the total income for the year doesn't exceed a certain thresholds, then they may not be required to file, but they may need to submit an IRS non-filer form if, especially if they're selected for verification, and especially if the financial aid office is requesting it. And so in some cases, some parents or students, they do decide to file even if they're not required to file. But if they're not required, they just have to, they may be asked for an IRS non-filer form. If they are required to file taxes because of their income does exceed certain thresholds, then the financial aid office, in order for them to continue with offering the financial aid package, they will ask the student to submit their taxes. And so if the student or the parents, if the parents decide that they do not want to file, then that student may be in jeopardy of losing that financial aid if they can't submit that paperwork. So we always consult students to talk to, and parents to talk to tax professionals who can further access their information and look at their information to see what would be the best option for them. All right, let's look at the Martha. Martha is an undocumented parent who does not meet qualification requirements for a Parent Plus loan. Her son Tito needs additional funding for school and meets all eligibility requirements for financial aid. Is there anything that Tito can do? So we often see this scenario once students have received their offer letters from the colleges. And so students, we see this a lot with mixed status families where the student is a US citizen and the parents don't have social security numbers, are undocumented, which means they're ineligible for the Parent Plus loan or any federal loans. And so in this case, if, with Mario, since the parents are undocumented, then they will need to talk to the institution to see if there are any professional judgments that they can grant him, to see if he can be eligible for any institutional funding to help him kind of make up for that amount that the mother is not eligible for. Perhaps they could qualify his federal loan amount. And also the school may request some type of documentation, like a letter from the parent indicating that they're not eligible for the Parent Plus loan. So it's just very important to have that communication, to have that communication with the financial aid officer and explain the situation, like what's going on, and see what options are available. And also connecting the students to scholarships and looking into different forgivable education loans for service, especially if they're going into certain fields. Okay, you are helping a DACA and an undocumented student apply for financial aid. Can they submit a FAFSA. And what kind of financial aid are they eligible for? So DACA and undocumented students are not eligible to receive federal or state funding here in North Carolina. There are some states that are providing funding, but North Carolina is not one of those states. So DACA students can technically complete an online or paper FAFSA, and this is recommended only if the school is asking for a FAFSA. And the reason why they would ask for a FAFSA is because they want to determine that student's financial need and to see what type of resources or institutional funding they may be able to grant that student. So keep in mind that they can complete the online FAFSA because they do have a social security number, but they're just not going to be eligible for that federal or that state funding, only institutional funding and other scholarships. Try to, become familiar with different resources like local, state, and national scholarships that are open to DACA and undocumented students. And we have a pretty good list on CFNC.org under our scholarship section that provides resources and information for students, particularly scholarships for DACA and undocumented students. So you're welcome to direct the students there, but just become familiar with those local, state, and national resources for students. Noel has been selected for verification and has been required to submit documentation for their undocumented parents. So again, this is the scenario that we see with students once they have received their offer letter, once they, a lot of times we get these calls like towards the end of the spring semester or in the summer. But April, can you go back a slide? I believe on right there. So understand that even, when students are going through verification and especially when they come from mixed status families, it could be, there could be intimidation, there can be uncertainty and fear, because they're not sure just, what the process, they're unfamiliar with the process. A lot of it is really new to them. But just assure the student, who is selected for verification and does have to submit information to connect with the financial aid office, make sure that they are providing all the documentation necessary, reaching out to the financial aid professional to see what documents can be accepted in case they're unable to provide like a non-filer form, for example. Like what are some other documents? If they're not able to provide a tax transcript, like what are other documents that could be acceptable? So helping them, working through that process, helping them, making sure that they are answering all the questions. And if the parents are not able to provide documentation, again, just make sure that you're connecting and that the student is connecting with financial aid professional who can walk them through that process. And just some reminders, just don't assume that every student that is Hispanic, Latinx is undocumented. Also, having a social security number does not mean that a student is eligible for financial aid. We think of and a good example is a student who has DACA, right? They have a social security number, but they're not eligible. And there are other different statuses where students do have a social, but again, they're not eligible to receive financial aid. DACA and undocumented students are not eligible for federal aid, but they can certainly qualify for institutional aid and scholarships at certain institutions. Again, we do offer a resource of scholarships. We have a list of scholarships for students, and we have videos and tools on our CFNC website for educators to help you just walk through certain steps with students. And then think about different ways to help students save for college. So thinking about distance learning, talking to them about earning college credits while they are in high school, like AP classes, the Korean College Promise, CLEP exams, thinking about sponsorships, especially if they go to the community colleges. and fellowships, and also looking into the NC Promise program. So sitting down and kind of thinking creatively with the student on different options that are available to them. And so if you have other ideas, feel free to share them, other ways that you may have worked or helped students that may be DACA and documented or from mixed status families. We would love to hear or learn from you. What are some things that you've seen and what are some things that you've done? All right, and we really hope that these scenarios were helpful. We want to thank you for all of your hard work, especially with all the changes that have happened this year. We know that it has been a very difficult year, but we appreciate everything that you're doing for the students and the state of North Carolina. And just, thank you for your desire to helping and wanting to help them with their post-secondary education. And so let us know how we are able to help you. Again, as a reminder, there are 9 CFNC representatives that are in your communities that are able to help you, that are able to support you. So feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions regarding applying or paying for college. And then lastly, as a reminder, again, just remember that we do provide presentations and resources for you and your students. And so let us know how we can help you as you are working with your students and your families.
And I'm going to come back into the chat box. Juana, there's a question that's going to be for you in here from Rebecca that I don't know the answer to. Do you mind addressing that if you can see it?
Rebecca Lester, if a parent who does have a Social Security number has not told the Social Security office that his citizenship status has been updated to citizen, can we simply use parent's current Social Security number? We were able to make his FSA, but it would not let us connect to the IRS data retrieval tool. Would we simply manually enter in his taxes? Would we run into an error message when signing? So when individuals adjust their status, their Social Security number never doesn't change. Like usually that when they're assigned one, that doesn't change. So it's okay to use the Social Security number that they have. With a data retrieval tool, if they're not able to use it, then yes, you would enter the information manually. And if you entered zeros for the, let's say if the other parent had entered zeros for the other parent, then you may get an error message. But if you didn't enter any zeros, or the FAFSA doesn't detect any other errors, then you may not get that error message. The error message usually comes up whenever zeros have been entered for the 1 or 2 parents.
Thank you. And there's also a comment in here about that this is very true, that students, once they've done their FAFSA form and have been accepted to college, they sometimes forget that there are other steps. So we're not done necessarily when we do our FAFSA and get that admissions letter. That would be great, but we do have a good number of students who are selected for verification. And so if you all have questions about that, you're welcome to let us know. Verification is its own beast for a lot of our students because our students immediately are afraid they did something wrong. They may be afraid they're in trouble. We have students with different backgrounds and experiences, and that it can make students really nervous to go through verification. So we have someone who has said that they will try to at least show students how to get a text transcript if they weren't able to use the data retrieval tool, because obviously that's going to get them selected for verification pretty much immediately if they can't use that data retrieval tool. So we do also offer virtual presentations on verification. So we have just as CFNC, the reps, we have a presentation that we can do virtually for students that we typically do the middle of spring semester for this exact reason, perhaps around April or so. And the topics that we dig into are verification, because they usually know if they've been selected, we're getting in that area. student loans, because at this point they've probably gotten those offer letters and they may have to borrow. And whatever you told them about student loans at a presentation in the fall may have done this because they were like, you know, thinking, I'm not worried about it. Well, now it's April or May of senior year and it's time to know, I'm going to have to borrow something. And then we also go over offer letters and try to offer some information on understanding those offer letters because they can be super confusing. Some are great and laid out well, and some it's like you're like, I don't know what I'm looking at right now, and you've looked at 50 award letters in your life, you know. So you know, we try to help that. So, and Amy with CFNC, she's our 252 rep. She sent over a link for information on our CFNC information for our Spanish-speaking families, and then also that one pager for FAFSA completion. It's tips for students without a social security number. Okay, and then Juana sent over some more resources as well. And then I'm going to get out of my chat box as we finish up and just come over to a couple more slides. This is just what we talked about at the beginning. Let us know how we can help you. And then the last thing I'll say, and I'll leave that up, is we all have social media accounts. All of your reps do, and they provide lots of things on Facebook or Instagram or both, about resources, things we learn about. You know, keep in mind the FAFSA form for the, and now that I'm going to say the wrong year, the 2023-2024 FAFSA has got some big changes coming up. So just, you know, be ready for that in a couple years. We're not there yet. We don't have to worry about it yet. But, you know, I need to put in my head what I need for right now, not for what I need in a couple years. But just knowing that it's coming is important, I think. And then we also have a YouTube channel, so check that out, CFNC. We make a lot of different videos and we have a lot of different resources on there, and we have different playlists for students also. And Juana and her counterpart Juana do a great job with their playlist for our Spanish-speaking families and the different resources that they might need. And so there's a lot on the YouTube channel. It's just the CFNC or College Foundation North Carolina YouTube channel, and so you can find some stuff there. So. And so that is kind of all. We've reached 11 o'clock. Let me just check the chat box one more time and make sure. We have a question, will be a workshop to address the changes. There definitely will be, but not right now. Probably not next year. We probably will start digging into, we're trying to digest all of the changes ourselves right now. And so that'll be something that I'm sure will come maybe even perhaps sometime next year. So there will be eventually. And then we have one more question on here that we'll address, and then we'll just close up for the morning. Our early college is a 5-year program, and most of those filling out the FAFSA are 13th graders. Yep. Consequently, they are not being included in the numbers for our school. And so that's related to the finish the FAFSA, I do believe, and the FAFSA completion numbers. So I am going to throw, well, let's see. What's the outreach? Just shoot me an email. And I'll put you in touch with SCAA, State Education Assistance Authority. There's so many different folks that go into putting all of this together, and there's so many different pieces that work to provide you with CFNC or with the financial aid information or with Spanish services or with Finish the FAFSA or with the applications or transcripts. There's so much there. So we'll kind of be able to help you there. And Soretta put that link up there one more time for the students without a social security number. So thank you again for joining us. Juana, did you have anything else you need to add as we close up today?
I just
mistakenly.
Go ahead, Soretta.
It was a direct message to you, April, but I wanted to send it to everyone.
Oh, okay, I'll reshare it. Got it. Sorry, I miss that sometimes when it's just sent to me versus everyone. I do that a lot.
And I just want to thank everyone for joining. And if you all have any questions regarding any of the tricky situations that I talked about regarding DACA and documented or mixed status families, don't hesitate to reach out to me or my colleague, Juana Ramirez. Know that we are here to support you in any way that we can, along with all the other reps, of course. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.